Some believe that character creators and customizable avatars are key to making a player feel more immersed in a world, but I don't think anything could be further from the truth. While those things are great for creativity and self-expression, they do little to bridge that gap between player and character to create that feeling of oneness that only video games as a medium can provide. Hell, the times when I felt the most like I was in the game have been with characters that look and play the same way for everyone, and I think that's because choice has very little to do with any of it. No matter how much control you have over your avatar, the fact remains that we, as the players, experience a game's world very differently compared to the characters that inhabit it. While our characters interact on a very personal level, we can only do so through the game's mechanics, creating a disconnect. However, games have the power to immerse you by translating those intimate emotions into the mechanics, a language that the player can understand. Good example, death. An opinion I've heard a lot of, usually from frustrated Souls players, is that you shouldn't be punished for dying. Now, I'm not saying every game needs to be punishing, but writing it off like it's just fake difficulty is completely missing its value. Most video game stories are written with death as a central focus. Our characters are mortal, therefore they fear things that have the potential to kill them. Traps are dangerous and monsters are intimidating because of those negative consequences. However, we as the player don't share in those same consequences. It's not like if you die in the game, you die for real would ever be a good idea, but how we feel about death can completely change our experiences. If there are no consequences for our avatar dying, then there's no reason for us to be intimidated by anything. For some games, less focused on life and death, that's exactly what they could be going for. Overly confident characters like Bayonetta do well in games that want to make you feel like you're overpowered. But for other games that go on and on about how dangerous the world is and how scared you should be, it drives a wedge between you and your character. Things are intimidating to our protagonist, but not you. And at that point, fear becomes something you're just watching, rather than something you're actively participating in. For games that punish your deaths in a significant way, things are a little different. Dying and losing progress can be frustrating in the moment, but those deaths create context for the rest of the game, and help create experiences that other games couldn't hope to achieve. The entire roguelike genre is built on this concept. If you don't know, all roguelike games share several characteristics such as randomly generated levels, resource management, and most notably, permadeath. If you die at any point, it's game over. For example, in 2016's Enter the Gungeon, you can go 20 minutes, 40 minutes, even an hour before you take one too many bullets and you're sent all the way back to the start. For some, that might be an insane way to play, but this is the system that gives these games their unique quality. Because you become so overprotective of this one life you have, you approach the world differently. All of a sudden, that element of randomness that would probably be just annoying in another game becomes something threatening. Not knowing what's around the corner or what's in the next room is scary because you're not able to prepare for that forthcoming danger. Every item that you pick up becomes valuable because you know you'll only get so many in this one run. Every bullet that you dodge makes your heart skip a beat because you know every one of those bullets are lethal and could end your whole run right then and there. I'm talking pressure, apprehension, panic, adrenaline, triumph. These are things that you would feel if this was actually you traversing this dungeon. And these are the emotions that connect you, not just your character, but you to this game world. Of course, death isn't the only thing that can do this, but regardless, we'll talk about something similar. Heights. Have you ever been playing a game and you find yourself in a high up place and this little voice inside your head asks, "Can I fall here?" And I'm sure after that, one of two things proceed to happen. One, you plunge off the edge to your imminent death and you go, "Oh, I can fall." Or two, you run into an invisible wall that stops you. I think the reason why we're so curious is because we want to see how heights affect us as the player, even if there's little to no chance that we'll fall off during play. Maybe this is obvious, maybe it's not, but it doesn't matter how much a game shows you how high up your character is. If we can't feel that fear of heights in the only way we can as players, through our character falling, then that environment isn't something we're experiencing. We're just watching. Good example of this is the 2008 reboot of Prince of Persia. In this game, the developers decided to do away with traditional fail states or death screens in order to keep the flow of gameplay moving. So what they did was they integrated a companion character into the narrative named named Elika. Anytime the prince slips up his parkour, Elika will always catch him before he ever falls more than a few feet. There are some that praise this approach, but there is something being lost here. I played through this game multiple times, and it took me watching a Let's Play years later for it to finally sink in that there are a lot of high up places. Despite that fact, when I was playing, it never really felt like it, because I was never in danger of falling. Seeing Elika save you over and over and over again plays a role in how you view those high up cliffs, and over time, you stop seeing them as cliffs altogether. It's that same feeling you get when you run into that invisible wall, and you realize you're not really on an edge. You're on a platform with 4 barriers around you. My brain no longer sees the open air inviting the prince to a swift death. It sees a magnetic field ready to push me back up anytime I make a mistake. When I think of the games that made me feel that slight sense of vertigo, I think of games like Shadow of the Colossus. Any Colossus that I climb, I can fall off of. Yeah, I won't die from it, but I'll have to spend all that time climbing again, and that's enough to deter me from falling. At that point, I'm sharing in that fear of heights. That shared motivation is what connects us. In Prince of Persia 2008, it becomes something that disconnects us. Every time the prince lets out that panicky yell, I'm pushed out of the world, because I don't care that he slipped up. I know for absolute certain that he is not gonna fall, and there won't be any negative consequences. Elika may help the game feel more seamless, but she becomes something that breaks immersion for the player. Speaking of breaking immersion, nothing will take you out of an experience faster than when a game does this.
Spinning, make haste and retreat.
Okay, here we go.
Amir.
Kata! Flashwind.
The old win in the game, lose in the cutscene gimmick is something that Xenoblade Chronicles 2 is very fond of using. The reason why this kind of thing is so frustrating to almost every player is because you're being drop-kicked right out of the shoes of your character. You're being told, hey, you won, congratulations. But Rex here is being told, you lost, you weren't strong enough. Again, we can only experience the world through the game's mechanics. And in this particular game, the way we experience success and failure is through the battle system. Whenever we succeed, Rex has to succeed too. If he doesn't, then we're not experiencing the game's world in a similar way. I'm not particularly a fan of having a story segment where the main character fails right after a player-controlled moment, but if you have to do it, let the game kick your ass. My favorite example of this has to be Tales of Symphonia. Midway into the game, the party finds themselves facing off against a boss. Right after this boss, it's revealed that one of your party members, Kratos, is working for the enemy, and he becomes the very next boss fight. Now, this is a fight that is not designed for the player to win, but it's done pretty cleverly. Kratos isn't so powerful that winning doesn't seem plausible, but he's just strong enough to be a difficulty spike that the average player would not be able to handle. Furthermore, Tales of Symphonia is a game that requires some item management. Things like gels and life bottles are used to heal and revive your party members during battle, but you can only carry a limited amount at any time. This is important because this is the first time in the entire game where the player is forced to fight 2 bosses back to back. So chances are, the player used a good chunk of their items on the previous boss, which leads to an even faster death. This is a pretty decent way of setting up a loss for the main character, because you're sharing that loss together, and it makes sense within the context for the both of you. And if that wasn't enough, after you lose this fight, the main bad guy of the game shows up and wipes the floor with you. They feel like they're being kicked while they're down, you feel like you're being kicked while you're down. Again, shared experience. We talked a lot about death and falling and failure in this video, but those are just examples I felt like going with. There are lots of different feelings and emotions that mechanics can represent, and these are the things that great designers have been thinking about for decades. For example, what does adventure feel like? Does it feel like a waymarker always pointing you towards where you need to go, and a big map telling you where everything is? Or does it feel like choosing your own path, getting lost, and maybe having to map out the way yourself? How does a nightmare feel like? Maybe it feels like you're lacking perspective. Maybe it feels like you're losing control and you can't move properly. I could go on with examples all day, but I'm sure you get my point. So next time you're playing a game and you really get into its world, just ask yourself, what am I feeling? And what is my character feeling? because chances are there's a connection being made.
So we meet again.